The execution chamber was cold. Not the kind of cold that made you shiver, but the kind that seeped into your bones and reminded you that you were about to die. Dae-hyun stood chained to the platform in the center of the massive room, his wrists locked in electromagnetic restraints that hummed with power. Above him, curved galleries held hundreds of Vrelian citizens who had come to watch another human meet his end. He didn't look at them. His eyes were focused on the executioner. Thurok was massive, even for a Vrelian. Purple scales covered his reptilian body, and 4 arms hung at his sides, each one capable of crushing a human skull. He had killed more than 1,000 prisoners in this very chamber. The blade in his upper right hand was ceremonial, etched with the names of his victims in the old language. Today, Dae-hyun's name would be added to that list, or so they thought. The executioner began the ritual reading. His voice echoed through the chamber, amplified by the acoustics designed to make every word sound like judgment itself. Dae-hyun of Earth, you have been found guilty of terrorism against the Vrelian Empire. You destroyed 3 supply depots. You killed 47 soldiers. You incited rebellion among the lesser species. For these crimes, you will be executed. Dae-hyun said nothing. He had stopped talking during the interrogations 3 weeks ago. Let them think he was broken. Let them think the torture had worked. Every assumption they made was a weapon he could use later. High Inquisitor Vesh appeared as a hologram near the platform. The Vrelian official's scales were deep red, a sign of his rank. He looked down at Dae-hyun with the same expression someone might give to an insect they were about to step on. Before the sentence is carried out, the condemned is permitted final words. Speak, human. The crowd leaned forward. They always did. Final words were the best part of executions. Some prisoners begged. Some cursed. Some cried for their mothers. It didn't matter. They all died the same. Dae-hyun raised his head. His face was bruised from the beatings and a scar ran down his left cheek. But his eyes were clear, sharp. He looked directly at Thurok and spoke 2 words. You first. Silence fell across the chamber. The Vrelians didn't understand. Thurok's inner eyelids blinked in confusion. High Inquisitor Vesh's hologram flickered as if the words had somehow disrupted the projection itself. What did you say? Thurok asked. You heard me? Dae-hyun's voice was steady. You asked for my final words. I said you first. You die first. The crowd erupted in angry hisses and clicking sounds. The Vrelians didn't like defiance. They had conquered 43 species across 12 sectors of the galaxy. They were the apex predators of known space. Humans were supposed to be terrified of them, but Dae-hyun wasn't terrified. He was counting. 1001, 1002, 1003. The electromagnetic restraints pulsed with power in a rhythm. He had noticed it during his first day in the chamber, when they brought him in for a practice execution to break his spirit. The power cycled every 17 seconds. For a fraction of a moment, the field weakened. Not enough for most prisoners to notice. Not enough to matter, unless you were looking for it. Unless you had spent 3 weeks in this chamber, studying every detail, memorizing every pattern. 1014. 1015. Thurok stepped closer, raising his blade. You humans are all the same. You think your words make you brave. They don't, they make you foolish. Maybe, Dae-hyun said. But I'm not the one about to have a bad day. 1016. 1017. The lights flickered, it was barely noticeable. Just a tiny disruption in the power grid that ran through the facility. The kind of thing that happened in old buildings sometimes. The kind of thing that Ji-won had been programming into the system for months, waiting for this exact moment. The electromagnetic restraints released for half a second. Half a second was enough. Dae-hyun moved faster than any human should have been able to move after 3 weeks of torture. His right hand shot forward and grabbed Thurok's lower left wrist. The executioner was strong, but he was also surprised. Surprise was a weapon too. Dae-hyun twisted, using the Vrelian's own weight against him. The ceremonial blade spun through the air and Dae-hyun caught it with his left hand. The blade was heavy, designed for 4-armed aliens, but desperation made it light enough. He drove the blade up under Thurok's chin, through the soft tissue there into the brain cavity. The executioner died instantly. His body went rigid, then collapsed, all 4 arms sprawling across the platform. The crowd screamed. Alarms blared. Red emergency lights flooded the chamber. Dae-hyun pulled the blade free and jumped off the platform. His body screamed in pain. His ribs were cracked from the interrogations. His left leg had been broken and had healed wrong. But pain was temporary. Death was permanent. Security doors began to seal. Vrelian guards poured into the chamber from 3 entrances, their weapons charging with that distinctive whine that meant plasma was about to fly. Daehyun didn't run toward the exits. He ran toward the maintenance access panel on the eastern wall, the one that Jiwon had told him about in her last coded message before they caught her, the one that led down into the facility service tunnels. He reached it just as the first plasma bolt scorched the wall beside his head. The panel was locked, but the blade in his hand wasn't meant for cutting flesh alone. He drove it into the seam and pried. Metal screamed. The panel popped open. Daehyun dropped into the darkness below just as a dozen guards reached the spot where he had been standing. Their weapons fired down into the tunnel, but he was already rolling, already moving, already thinking 3 steps ahead. Behind him, he heard High Inquisitor Vesh shouting orders. "Seal all exits, find him." "I want that human's head on a spike." But Daehyun wasn't trying to escape, not yet. He reached into his mouth and pulled out a tiny device that had been hidden under his back molar for 3 weeks, a communicator so small it was barely the size of a grain of rice. He activated it with his thumb. A single pulse transmitted. Not a message. Not a call for help, just a pulse. 3 light years away on the bridge of the Resistance flagship Indomitable, a screen blinked green. Admiral Yuna saw it and closed her eyes for just a moment. Her brother had done it. He had actually done it. The signal meant he was inside, and the first part of the plan was complete. "Begin jump sequence," she said quietly. "All ships." "We go in 27 minutes. Back in the tunnels beneath the execution chamber, Daehyun kept moving. He had 27 minutes to reach the command core. 27 minutes to finish what he started. 27 minutes to make the Vrelian Empire regret they ever heard the name of his species. The real execution was just beginning. The service tunnels smelled like oil and ozone. Emergency lights cast red shadows on the metal walls as Daehyun ran. His leg throbbed with each step, but he pushed the pain away. Pain could be dealt with later. Right now he had a job to finish. Behind him, he heard the guards entering the tunnel system. Their heavy boots clanged on the metal floors. They were shouting to each other in their own language, coordinating their search. They thought they were hunting a desperate prisoner trying to escape. They didn't understand that Daehyun had spent 3 weeks memorizing the layout of this entire facility from conversations with other prisoners and observations during his daily march to interrogation. He turned left at an intersection, then immediately climbed up a maintenance ladder. The guards ran past below him following the obvious path. Amateurs. They thought like predators chasing prey. Daehyun thought like a soldier completing a mission. In cell block 7, Taemin heard the alarms. He pressed his ear against the door of his cell and listened. He had been a prisoner here for 4 months, ever since the Vrelians caught him trying to sabotage their shipyard. He was an engineer, not a fighter, but he recognized the sound of chaos when he heard it. Something was happening, something big. He moved to the air vent in the corner of his cell. It was too small to escape through, but sound traveled through the ventilation system. He had learned to communicate with prisoners in other cells using it. Now he heard whispers traveling through the metal ducts. "Did you hear that? Someone killed Thurok. It was the human, the one they were going to execute today. He's still alive." Taemin felt something stir in his chest. Hope. He had almost forgotten what that felt like. He began tapping a code on the vent cover. 3 short taps, 3 long, 3 short. The old Earth signal for distress. But in the prison it meant something else. It meant get ready. Captain Morox arrived at the execution chamber 7 minutes after Thurok died. He was the chief of security for the entire detention facility, and he was furious. One human prisoner had made his entire operation look like a joke in front of hundreds of Vrelian citizens. He studied the body of the executioner. The blade wound was precise, professional. This wasn't a lucky strike. This was a trained killer who had been waiting for his moment. "Show me the security footage," Morox ordered. A technician pulled up the video on a portable screen. They watched Daehyun's escape in slow motion. The way he moved, the way he chose his path, the way he knew exactly where to go. "He knew," Morox said quietly. "He knew about the maintenance access. Someone told him." "Impossible, sir. All prisoners are kept isolated. He had no contact with anyone except interrogators." "Then how did he know?" Morox's scales darkened with anger. Pull up the facility access logs for the past 6 months. Every technician, every guard, every administrator, someone helped him. What Morox didn't know was that Ji-Wan had been helping for much longer than 6 months. She had started working in the facility's administrative office 2 years ago, using forged credentials that said she was a half-breed from a conquered species. Her real identity was buried under 17 layers of false documentation. She looked alien enough to pass inspection. The Vrelians never suspected that a human could infiltrate their most secure facility. For 2 years she had watched, learned, gathered intelligence. And when the Resistance needed someone inside for the most important mission they had ever attempted, Ji-Wan was already in position. She had programmed the power fluctuations. She had mapped the tunnel systems. She had left coded messages in maintenance reports that Dae-Hyun could access during his interrogations, when the systems briefly connected to shared databases. And now, as Captain Morox searched for the traitor, Ji-Wan sat at her desk in the administrative wing and calmly deleted files. She knew they would find her eventually. She had maybe 15 minutes before security traced the system modifications back to her terminal. 15 minutes was enough. Dae-Hyun reached junction point 12 in the tunnel system. This was where it got dangerous. To reach the command core, he had to cross through a main corridor that had guard stations at both ends. There was no way around it. He checked the ceremonial blade. Still sharp. Still useful. He took 3 deep breaths, centering himself the way his instructors had taught him in the Earth Defense Force. Fear was normal. Panic was deadly. Stay calm. Stay focused. He climbed another ladder and emerged in a storage room. Through the door, he could hear guards running past. They were still searching the lower levels. Good. He waited until the footsteps faded, then stepped into the corridor. He walked calmly as if he had every right to be there. Confidence was camouflage. Most people saw what they expected to see. He made it 30 feet before someone shouted, "There! The prisoner!" Dae-Hyun ran. Not back toward the tunnels, but forward. Always forward. A plasma bolt burned past his shoulder. Another hit the wall ahead of him, melting a hole in the metal. He turned a corner and found himself facing 3 guards. They were raising their weapons. He had maybe 2 seconds before they fired. He threw the ceremonial blade. It spun through the air and caught the first guard in the throat. The alien went down, gurgling. Dae-Hyun didn't stop moving. He grabbed a fire extinguisher from the wall and hurled it at the second guard's head. The impact knocked the Vrelian unconscious. The third guard got a shot off. The plasma bolt hit Dae-Hyun in the left shoulder. The pain was instant and overwhelming. The smell of his own burning flesh filled his nostrils. But he didn't scream. He couldn't afford to scream. He tackled the third guard before the alien could fire again. They went down together in a tangle of limbs. The guard was stronger, but Dae-Hyun was desperate. He got his hands on the Vrelian's weapon and twisted it around. The plasma charge fired point blank into the guard's chest. Dae-Hyun rolled off the body and grabbed the weapon. His left arm hung useless at his side. The burn wound was severe. He could feel shock trying to drag him down into darkness. He fought it. Not yet. He wasn't done yet. He had 18 minutes left. In the administrative wing, Captain Morox burst into Ji-Wan's office. She looked up calmly from her desk. Too calmly. He knew immediately. "You," he said. "Me?" She agreed. "You're human." "Yes." Morox drew his weapon. "You've been here for years. How long have you been planning this?" "Long enough." Ji-Wan's fingers moved across her keyboard, finishing the last sequence. "Your security protocols are actually quite good. It took me months to find all the holes. But you know what your real weakness is?" "What?" "You think you're invincible. You think no one would dare challenge you. That arrogance made you blind." Morox fired. The plasma bolt hit Ji-Wan in the chest. She died instantly, slumping forward onto her desk. But her final keystrokes had already executed. In the command core, a virus began spreading through the system. It was subtle, quiet. The security team wouldn't even notice it for another 12 minutes. By then, it would be too late. Taman heard the explosions through the ventilation system. Other prisoners were shouting now, banging on their cell doors. The guards were running everywhere, trying to contain the situation. In the confusion, no one noticed when Cell Block 7's locking system briefly glitched. Taman's door opened for 3 seconds. He didn't hesitate. He slipped out and ran toward the maintenance access he had noticed during his first week of imprisonment. Other prisoners followed him. Within minutes, 47 humans were free and moving through the facility. They weren't soldiers. They were engineers, pilots, farmers, teachers. But they were also survivors. And they knew this might be their only chance. Dae-hyun reached the command core with 11 minutes to spare. The door was sealed, but the virus Ji-won had planted was already working. The security protocols were compromised. The locks were weakening. He used the stolen plasma weapon to blast through the remaining barriers. Alarms screamed. The entire facility knew where he was now, but it didn't matter anymore. He stepped into the command core and saw the central computer terminal. This was it. This was what he had sacrificed everything to reach. He pulled out a data chip that had been hidden in a false tooth. The Resistance's best programmers had spent months creating the code stored on it. He inserted the chip into the terminal. 10 minutes until Yuna arrived. 10 minutes to upload everything and bring down the shields. Behind him, he heard boots in the corridor. The guards were coming. Dae-hyun smiled through the pain. Let them come. He was exactly where he needed to be. Admiral Yuna stood on the bridge of the Indomitable and watched the countdown timer. 9 minutes until they jumped into Vrelian space. 9 minutes until they either rescued hundreds of prisoners or died trying. She had not slept in 36 hours. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw her brother's face, the way he had looked when he volunteered for this mission. Calm, determined, already dead in his own mind. Admiral, her second-in-command said. Hyun-woo was a good officer, but he was worried. We're detecting Vrelian patrol ships near the target zone more than we expected. How many more? 40% more than intelligence predicted. Yuna nodded slowly. Of course there were more ships. The Vrelians weren't stupid. They knew humans were planning something. They just didn't know what. Does it change the plan? It makes it more dangerous. Everything about this plan is dangerous. Yuna looked at the faces of her bridge crew. They were young, too young. But the war had taken the older generation. Now it was their turn to fight. We proceed. No changes. In the Kelvar Nebula, hidden among clouds of gas and ice, 15 human ships prepared for battle. They were outnumbered, outgunned. But they had something the Vrelians didn't have. They had a reason to fight that went beyond conquest and empire. They were fighting to go home. Sujin sat at her communications station and monitored the signal from Calth 9. She was only 23 years old. Before the war, she had been studying music at university. Now she was a resistance officer, and her job was to decode messages from deep cover agents like Ji-won. The screen blinked. A new signal. She pulled up the data and her hands started shaking. Admiral, she said quietly, Ji-won is dead. The bridge went silent. Everyone knew Ji-won. She had been sending intelligence from inside the prison facility for 2 years. She had saved dozens of lives with her information. When? Yuna asked. 7 minutes ago. Captain Morox found her. She died protecting the mission. Yuna closed her eyes for a moment. Another name to remember. Another friend lost. The list was getting too long. Did she complete her part? Yes, ma'am. The virus is uploaded. Security protocols are compromised. And... Sujin paused. She left us a message. Just 2 words. She said, worth it. Worth it. Yuna wanted to believe that. She needed to believe that. Because if all these deaths weren't worth it, then what were they even fighting for? 5 minutes to jump, Hyun-woo announced. Inside the command core, Dae-hyun watched the upload progress. 70%. 80%. The virus was spreading through the facility's systems like fire through dry grass. In 3 minutes, it would broadcast the location of every Vrelian military installation in this sector. It would also deactivate the planetary shield generator that protected Calth 9. The door behind him exploded inward. Guards poured into the room, weapons raised. Daehyun grabbed the edge of the computer terminal and pulled himself behind it. Plasma bolts scorched the air where he had been standing. He returned fire with the stolen weapon. The odds were impossible. 20 guards against 1 injured human. He knew how this would end, but the upload was at 90% now. Just a little longer. Surrender. Captain Morok stepped through the doorway. His weapon was aimed directly at Daehyun's head. Surrender and you will die quickly. Fight and I will make your death last days. Daehyun laughed. It hurt to laugh. Everything hurt. But he laughed anyway. You still don't understand. I'm not trying to survive. I'm trying to win. You have lost. You are alone. You are injured. You have nowhere to run. I'm not alone. Daehyun looked at the screen. 95%. I'm never alone. That's the difference between us. You conquer. We unite. Morox fired. The plasma bolt hit Daehyun in the leg. He collapsed behind the terminal. His vision swam. He could feel his body shutting down. Too much damage, too much blood loss. But the screen showed 100%. The virus activated fully. Every computer system in the facility went dark for 3 seconds. Then the lights came back on, but everything was different. The security doors were open. The cell blocks were unlocked. The planetary shields were down. And across Vrelian space, 16,000 hidden resistance cells received the coordinates of military targets they had been waiting years to attack. Daehyun had done it. The mission was complete. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small photo. It was creased and dirty, but he could still see the faces. Him and Yuna, taken 10 years ago before the war. They were smiling. They looked so young. Sorry, I won't make it home, he whispered to the photo. Then the Indomitable and 14 other resistance ships jumped into normal space, 300 kilometers above Calth 9. The Vrelian fleet was waiting for them. 42 warships against 15 human vessels. The numbers looked bad, but numbers didn't tell the whole story. Commander Jae-sung stood in the dropship bay of the Indomitable and addressed his Marines. 200 soldiers in combat armor, ready to drop onto the prison moon the moment the defenses were down. Listen up, he said. His voice was calm despite what they were about to do. Our mission is simple. Get in. Get the prisoners. Get out. We have 1 hour before Vrelian reinforcements arrive. That means no heroics, no unnecessary risks. We stick to the plan. One of the young Marines raised her hand. Sir, what about Daehyun? Jae-sung had known someone would ask. Daehyun's mission was to get us inside. Our mission is to bring our people home. If we find him alive, we bring him too. But the prisoners come first. That's what he would want. The Marines nodded. They all knew the stories about Daehyun. He was a legend in the resistance. The man who walked into a Vrelian prison, knowing he would never walk out. The man who looked death in the face and told it to go first. 60 seconds to drop, the pilot announced. In the command core, Daehyun heard something. Explosions in the distance, ship weapons firing, the sound of a battle in orbit. They came. His sister actually came. Captain Morox heard it too. His scales paled. Impossible. They couldn't have gotten through the shields. The shields are down. Daehyun smiled through the pain. Your facility is wide open, and my people are coming for theirs. Throughout the prison, Taemin and the other freed prisoners were fighting their way toward the landing bays. They had no weapons except what they could steal. They had no training except what they had learned in captivity. But they fought like demons because they knew this was their only chance at freedom. Minho was only 16 years old. He had been captured during a raid on his colony world when he was 13. He barely remembered what freedom felt like. But as he ran through the corridors with the other prisoners, something fierce burned in his chest. An old woman fell beside him, shot by a guard. Minho stopped to help her up. She pushed him away. Go, she gasped. Don't stop. Don't let them take you again. Minho ran. Tears streamed down his face. He ran through smoke and fire and chaos. He ran past bodies and broken dreams. He ran until he burst through a door and saw the sky for the first time in 3 years. Above, human dropships were descending. The Vrelian fleet was engaging the resistance ships in a fierce battle. Explosions lit up the darkness like terrible flowers. The space battle was brutal. The Vrelians had superior numbers and firepower. But the humans had fury and desperation. Every human ship that was destroyed took a Vrelian ship with it. Yuna watched the tactical display from the Indomitable's bridge. They were losing ships. The Invincible was destroyed. The Dauntless was crippled. But the dropships were landing. The Marines were inside the facility. The mission was working. "Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from the surface," Sujin said. "It's Captain Morox. He wants to negotiate a ceasefire." "Put him through." Morox's face appeared on the screen. His scales were dark with rage. "Admiral Yuna, your brother is dying in front of me. Withdraw your forces, and I will let him live." Yuna looked at the Vrelian commander. She thought about her brother, about Ji-1, about all the people who had died for this moment. She thought about what Dae-hyun would say if he were here. "No," she said simply. "You don't get to use him as a bargaining chip, and he wouldn't want me to. Complete the mission." That's what he would say. "So that's what I'm doing." She cut the transmission. Morox stared at the dead screen in disbelief. Then he turned to Dae-hyun. "Your own sister abandons you." Dae-hyun shook his head weakly. "She didn't abandon me. She understood. That's the difference. We're willing to sacrifice ourselves for each other. You can't beat that. You can never beat that." Jae-sung's Marines breached the command core 14 minutes later. They found Morox dead, killed by his own officers who decided surrender was better than annihilation. They found Dae-hyun unconscious, barely clinging to life. The medics worked frantically. His pulse was weak. He had lost too much blood. "Stay with us," Jae-sung said. "Your sister's waiting for you." Dae-hyun's eyes opened for just a moment. "Did we get them?" "We're getting them. 700 prisoners evacuated so far." Dae-hyun smiled. Then his eyes closed again. The evacuation took 53 minutes. When the last dropship lifted off, the human fleet jumped away, leaving Calth 9 behind. They had lost 4 ships and 300 Marines, but they had rescued 842 prisoners. And across the galaxy, the real work was beginning. The battle lasted 6 hours. By the time it was over, the space around Calth 9 was filled with debris. Broken ships tumbled through the void. Bodies floated in the darkness. Both sides had paid a terrible price. But the humans had achieved their objective. They had rescued their people and escaped. The Vrelians had only defended an empty prison. Commander Jae-sung stood in the medical bay of the Indomitable and watched the doctors work on Dae-hyun. The injuries were severe: burns, broken bones, internal bleeding. The doctors weren't sure if he would survive. "He's strong," one of the doctors said. Dr. Yoon Hai was one of the Resistance's best surgeons. She had saved hundreds of lives during the war. "His body is trying to shut down, but his will to live is keeping him going. I've never seen anything like it." "That's because you've never met someone like him," Jae-sung said. Down the corridor, other rescued prisoners were being treated. Some had been in captivity for years. Their bodies were weak from malnutrition and torture, but their spirits were unbroken. When they learned what Dae-hyun had done, they wanted to see him. They wanted to thank the man who had traded his life for theirs. But Dae-hyun was unconscious. He didn't hear them. He didn't hear anything. On the bridge, Admiral Yuna was conducting the after-action assessment. The tactical officers were reporting losses and damage. It was bad, but not as bad as it could have been. "The Vrelian fleet took heavy casualties," Hyunwoo reported. "We destroyed or disabled 23 of their 42 ships. Our jammers prevented them from calling for reinforcements until we were already jumping away." "And the virus?" "Spreading faster than expected. The coordinates Dae-hyun uploaded are being distributed to every resistance cell we have. Within a week, hundreds of targets will be identified. The Vrelians won't be able to defend them all. Yuna nodded. This was the real victory, not the battle they had just fought, but the war they had just escalated. The Vrelians would now have to defend hundreds of installations instead of just guarding their borders. They would have to spread their forces thin. They would have to look over their shoulders. There's something else, Sujin said quietly. The execution footage. Someone leaked it. The video of Dae-hyun killing Thurok and saying "you first" is being broadcast across every civilian network we can access. Billions of people have seen it. Billions of aliens, you mean? Yes, ma'am. And they're talking about it. The Vrelians tried to suppress it, but it's spreading too fast. People are asking questions. Why would a human say that? What did he mean? Yuna understood. Her brother hadn't just attacked a prison. He had attacked the idea that the Vrelians were invincible. He had shown the galaxy that humans refused to be broken. That was worth more than any military victory. Let it spread, she said. Let everyone see what we're willing to do. In a hidden facility 3 star systems away, Dr. Yoon-hai's research team was analyzing the raid's success. They weren't looking at military tactics. They were studying psychology. Specifically, they were studying why humans were so effective at resistance warfare. Dr. Yoon-hai had been working on this question for 3 years. She had interviewed thousands of prisoners, soldiers, and civilians. She had studied every human culture and every alien species they fought against. And she had discovered something important. Humans were different. Not physically. There were stronger species, faster species, more intelligent species. But humans had something unique in their psychology. They refused to accept defeat as permanent. Other species, when conquered, would submit. They would adapt to their new reality. They would make peace with being ruled. It was logical. It was practical. Fighting a superior force was a waste of resources. But humans didn't think that way. When humans were defeated, they became angry. When they were imprisoned, they planned escape. When they were tortured, they became more determined. Defeat didn't break their spirit. It forged it into something harder. Dr. Yoon-hai called it the human doctrine. It wasn't a military strategy. It was a psychological weapon. Make every defeat costly. Make every occupation difficult. Make every execution a rallying cry. Turn every human death into inspiration for 10 more fighters. The Vrelians had conquered 43 species. But humans were the first species that became more dangerous the more you oppressed them. Back on Calth 9, the prison facility was in ruins. The remaining Vrelian garrison was trying to restore order, but it was hopeless. The freed prisoners had sabotaged everything before they left. Critical systems were damaged. Records were destroyed. The facility would take months to repair. Supreme Overlord Krenth arrived on the prison moon 3 hours after the humans escaped. He was the highest military commander in this sector. When he saw the damage, his scales darkened with fury. Explain this, he demanded. The surviving officers tried to explain. 1 human prisoner. 1 infiltrator who had been working there for years. 1 virus that brought down all their defenses. It sounded impossible. It was impossible. But it had happened anyway. Where is Captain Morox?
Dead, Overlord.
His own officers killed him when they realized the battle was lost. Krenth studied the bodies in the command core. He saw the ceremonial blade that had killed Thurok. He saw the blood. He saw the evidence of a single human fighting through dozens of guards. Show me the security footage, he ordered. They showed him everything. Daehyun's escape. His fight through the facility. His determined march to the command core. They showed him the moment when the human uploaded the virus, knowing he was about to die but doing it anyway. Krenth watched in silence. When it was over, he spoke 1 word. Terrifying. His officers looked at him in surprise. The Overlord was never afraid of anything. They are not fighting to win battles, Krenth continued. They are fighting to make the war unwinnable. Do you understand the difference? Every human we kill creates propaganda. Every human we capture becomes a potential saboteur. Every victory we achieve costs us more than it should. This is not how war is supposed to work. What do we do, Overlord? Krenth didn't answer immediately. He was thinking about the other species they had conquered. The ones who had submitted peacefully. The ones who accepted Vrelian rule because it was logical, because it was inevitable. Humans weren't like that. Humans would rather die fighting than live in submission, And worse, they were teaching other species to think the same way. We need to make an example, Krenth said finally. We need to show them that resistance is futile. We will destroy Earth itself. We will make sure no human ever raises a hand against us again. But when he gave the order to his fleet, something unexpected happened. 3 of his captains refused to carry it out. They didn't refuse because they liked humans. They refused because they were afraid of what would happen next. If the Vrelians destroyed Earth, every human in the galaxy would become a suicide bomber. Every captured human would become a martyr. The war would never end. Krenth executed the 3 captains for cowardice. But deep down he knew they were right. The humans had changed the rules of war, and the Vrelians didn't know how to adapt. On the Indomitable, Minho sat in the refugee quarters and stared at his hands. They were shaking. He had killed people today. Vrelian guards who would have killed him first. But still, he was 16 years old and he had taken lives. An older woman sat down next to him. Her name was Hannah. She had been a prisoner for 5 years. It never gets easier, she said gently, but it gets necessary. That's what war does. It makes necessary things feel terrible. Did I do the right thing? You survived. You helped others survive. That's all any of us can do. Minho nodded slowly. He thought about Dae-hyun, lying unconscious in the medical bay, about Ji-won who died so they could escape, about all the people who sacrificed everything so others could be free. I want to join the resistance, he said. Really join. Not just survive. I want to fight. Hannah smiled sadly. You already are fighting. Every day you refuse to give up, you're fighting. Every day you remember who you are, you're fighting. That's what they can't beat, our refusal to forget. In the medical bay, Dae-hyun's eyes opened for a brief moment. Dr. Yoon-hye was there immediately. Don't try to talk, she said. You're safe. You're on the Indomitable. The mission succeeded. Dae-hyun tried to speak anyway. His voice was barely a whisper. How many? 842 prisoners rescued, including a lot of people who thought they would never see freedom again. Dae-hyun closed his eyes. A tear ran down his bruised cheek. Good, he whispered. Then he fell unconscious again, but he was smiling. Admiral Yuna stood at the observation window and looked at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Vrelian Empire was regrouping, planning, preparing for revenge. This was far from over. But for the first time in years, Yuna felt something she had almost forgotten. Hope. Real, genuine hope. Because they had proven something today. They had proven that humans couldn't be broken, that humans wouldn't surrender, that every prison was just a training ground. Every execution was just motivation. The Vrelians wanted to conquer the galaxy, but humans wanted something more fundamental. They wanted to be free, and when you wanted freedom badly enough, you would pay any price to get it. Hyun-woo approached her. Admiral, we're receiving reports from across the sector. Resistance cells are activating. The coordinates Dae-hyun uploaded are being put to use. We're looking at 50 coordinated attacks within the next week. How are the Vrelians responding? They're pulling back their border patrols to defend core installations. They're consolidating their forces. They're playing defense now. Yuna nodded. Playing defense. That was the key. The Vrelians were no longer the hunters. They were the hunted. Send a message to all resistance cells, she said. Tell them what happened today. Tell them about Dae-hyun. Tell them that one human walked into a Vrelian prison and walked out with 800 people. Tell them that we don't beg for mercy. We make our enemies regret starting this war. The message went out across 100 worlds, and slowly, across the galaxy, other species began to listen. They began to wonder. They began to ask themselves a dangerous question. If humans can do this, why can't we? 6 months passed like a slow sunrise after a long night. Dae-hyun woke up in a medical facility on a hidden moon. He didn't remember the journey there. The doctors had kept him in an induced coma while his body healed. Burns, broken bones, organ damage. They had put him back together piece by piece. But some things couldn't be fixed. His left arm was gone. The plasma burns had been too severe to save it. His left leg was rebuilt with metal and synthetic tissue. He would walk again, but he would never run like he used to. He would never fight like he used to, but he was alive. That was more than he had expected. Admiral Yuna visited him on his first day awake. She sat beside his bed and held his remaining hand. She didn't say anything at first. She just sat there and tears ran down her face. You're crying, Dae-hyun said. His voice was rough from disuse. I thought I lost you. When the doctors said you might not wake up, I thought I had sent you to your death for nothing. It wasn't for nothing. 800 people are free because of what we did. 842, Yuna corrected. And that's just the beginning. Everything is changing, brother. The whole galaxy is changing. She showed him the reports. In 6 months, the resistance had grown from scattered cells into a real movement. The coordinates Daehyun had uploaded had led to successful raids on 63 Vrelian installations. Weapons stolen, intelligence gathered, prisoners freed, but more importantly, other species were joining the fight. The Serene Confederacy, which had been neutral for decades, was now secretly supplying the resistance. The Celtic people, conquered 30 years ago, had started their own uprising. 3 minor species had declared independence from Vrelian rule. The empire was crumbling, not quickly, not dramatically, but steadily, like a building with cracks in its foundation, waiting for the final push that would bring it all down. And there's something else, Yuna said. She pulled out a tablet and showed him a video. It was the execution footage, the moment when Daehyun had said "you first" to Thurok. It had been watched by billions of people across hundreds of worlds. Someone had edited it with text in multiple languages. The message was simple. Humanity doesn't beg. Humanity fights, you're famous, Yuna said. They're calling you the man who defied death. Children draw pictures of you. Soldiers pray to your name before battles. You've become a symbol. Daehyun looked uncomfortable. I'm not a symbol. I'm just a soldier who did his job. That's exactly why you're a symbol. Because you didn't do it for glory. You did it because it needed to be done. In the Serene Confederacy, Council Speaker Velthus was writing a report for his government. He had been studying the human resistance for months, trying to understand how such a small species was causing such massive problems for the mighty Vrelian Empire. His conclusion was simple, but profound. Humans had weaponized hope. Every other species fought to win battles. Humans fought to prevent their enemies from winning the war. There was a difference. Winning battles required superior forces. Preventing victory just required making the cost too high. The Vrelians could destroy any human fleet. They could conquer any human world. They could kill any human soldier, but they couldn't kill the idea that humans represented. The idea that freedom was worth any sacrifice. The idea that defiance was possible. That idea was spreading like fire through dry grass, and ideas couldn't be killed with weapons. Velthus recommended that his government openly support the human resistance. It was a risk. The Vrelians might retaliate, but he believed the empire was doomed anyway. Better to be on the right side of history when it fell. His government agreed. 3 days later, the Serene Confederacy announced they were recognizing the human resistance as a legitimate government in exile. It was a political earthquake. Dozens of other neutral powers started reconsidering their positions. The Vrelians were no longer seen as invincible. They were seen as vulnerable. On a training moon controlled by the resistance, Minho was learning to pilot a fighter. He was good at it. The instructor said he had natural talent. But Minho knew the truth. He wasn't talented. He was motivated. Every time he sat in the cockpit, he thought about the 3 years he spent in that prison. He thought about the old woman who had pushed him forward and told him to run. He thought about all the people who hadn't made it out. He flew for them. Every mission, every training run. He flew so that their sacrifices would mean something. The instructors also taught him about the human doctrine. Dr. Yoon Hai's research had been turned into formal military strategy. It was being taught to every new recruit. The doctrine was simple. Never surrender, never submit. Make every fight costly. Turn every defeat into a lesson. Use pain as fuel. Transform suffering into strength. It wasn't just military tactics. It was a philosophy of survival. In the Vrelian capital, Supreme Overlord Krenth was facing a crisis. His empire was fracturing. Rebellions everywhere. Supply lines disrupted. Client species refusing orders. And worst of all, his own soldiers were questioning whether this war could be won. He had tried everything. Mass executions to terrify populations into submission. That just created more martyrs. Propaganda campaigns to discredit the resistance. That just made humans look braver. Military crackdowns on rebellion. That just spread the fighting to new worlds. Nothing worked, because the humans had changed. The rules of war, and the Vrelians were still playing the old game. Krenth called a meeting of his top military advisors. We need a decisive victory, something that will break their spirit once and for all. There is no breaking their spirit, one admiral said quietly. That's what we don't understand. They don't have a breaking point. You can kill them, but you can't defeat them. Every death just makes the survivors more determined. Then we kill them all. There are billions of humans across hundreds of worlds. We don't have the resources for genocide on that scale. And if we tried, every other species in the galaxy would unite against us. We would be destroyed. Krenth realized the truth. They couldn't win. Not the way the war was currently being fought. The humans had found their weakness. The Vrelians needed conquered species to be docile, to submit, to accept their place. But humans refused to accept anything. The Vrelians could keep fighting for years, decades even. But eventually, the cost would become unbearable. The Empire would collapse under its own weight, trying to hold down populations that would never stop resisting. What do you recommend? Krenth asked. The room was silent. No one wanted to say it, but everyone was thinking it. Negotiate. Make peace. Let the humans go before this war destroyed them all. Dr. Yun Hai visited Dae-hyun in his recovery room. She wanted to interview him for her research. She wanted to understand what had motivated him to take such an impossible mission. Why did you volunteer? She asked. Dae-hyun thought about it for a long time. Because someone had to. Because those people in that prison deserved a chance. Because if I didn't do it, I would spend the rest of my life wondering if I could have made a difference. You knew you would probably die. Probably. But probably isn't definitely. And even if I died, the mission could succeed. That was enough. Where does that come from? That willingness to sacrifice yourself? Dae-hyun smiled slightly. From being human, I guess. We're stubborn. We don't know when to quit. Our ancestors survived ice ages and plagues and wars that killed millions. We survived because we refused to give up. That's in our blood. That's in our culture. That's who we are. Dr. Yun Hai nodded. She was writing a book about the human doctrine, about why humans were different. Dae-hyun's words would be on the first page. A year after the raid on Kolth 9, the Vrelian Empire agreed to peace negotiations. They didn't surrender. They never officially admitted defeat, but they agreed to withdraw from 23 contested systems. They agreed to release all human prisoners. They agreed to recognize human sovereignty. It wasn't everything the resistance wanted, but it was enough to claim victory. The war wasn't over. There would be more battles, more sacrifices, more years of fighting. But the momentum had shifted. The Empire was retreating. The resistance was growing. Dae-hyun attended the victory celebration on the Indomitable. He walked with a cane now. His body was broken in ways that would never fully heal. But he walked among the celebrating soldiers and refugees, and they treated him like a hero. A young girl approached him. Her name was Hana. She was only 8 years old, born in captivity, freed in the raid. She handed him a drawing. It showed a stick figure with one arm, holding a sword, standing over a defeated monster. That's you, she said shyly. You're the bravest person in the world. Dae-hyun knelt down, balancing on his cane. I'm not brave. I'm just stubborn. There's a difference. What's the difference? Brave people aren't afraid. Stubborn people are afraid, but they do it anyway. He handed the drawing back to her. Keep this. And remember, you don't have to be brave to be free. You just have to refuse to give up. Later that night, Dae-hyun stood with his sister on the observation deck. They looked at the stars in comfortable silence. What will you do now? Yuna asked. You've earned retirement, you've earned peace. Peace doesn't exist yet. Not real peace. Not while there are still humans in chains. Not while there are still species suffering under Empire rule. So you'll keep fighting. In whatever way I can. I'm not a soldier anymore, not like before. But there are other ways to fight. Teaching, training, helping people understand that they're stronger than they think they are. Yuna smiled. The man who told death to go first. I guess you really meant it. I meant it then. I mean it now. Death will come for all of us eventually, but it doesn't get to choose when. We choose how we live. We choose what we fight for. We choose whether we stand up or bow down. He looked at his sister. We choose to be human, and humans don't surrender. Across the galaxy on 100 worlds, people watched the same video, the execution footage that had started it all. They watched a bruised and broken human stand in chains and tell his executioner, "You first." They watched him fight impossible odds and win, and they began to believe. They began to hope. They began to resist, because if one human could do that, what could millions do? What could billions do? The message was spreading, not just among humans. Among all the oppressed species of the galaxy, the message was simple and powerful. Freedom is possible. Resistance works. Victory is achievable. All you have to do is refuse to quit. The Vrelian Empire would learn this lesson the hard way. You can conquer a species. You can occupy their worlds. You can imprison their bodies. But you cannot break the human spirit. You cannot chain human determination. You cannot kill human hope. Because humans don't fight to win. Humans fight until they win. And there's a difference. That difference would change the galaxy forever. Daehyun looked at the stars and smiled. Somewhere out there in prisons and camps and occupied worlds, humans were watching that video. They were seeing what one person could do. They were learning that defiance was possible. They were learning to say those two words that would become the battle cry of a revolution. You first. And the executioners of the galaxy would learn, too late, what those words really meant. They meant that humanity would survive. That humanity would resist. That humanity would win. Not today, not tomorrow, but eventually, inevitably, because that's what humans do. They refuse to die quietly. They refuse to submit peacefully. They refuse to accept defeat as permanent, and that makes all the difference.